All right, so this is the 1-minute warning. So as soon as the recording is ready, we will begin. The regular meeting of the Charter Commission's Redistricting, Community Outreach, and Education Work Group will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Charter Commission's Redistricting, Community Outreach, and Education Work Group. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. This meeting is public and subject to the open meeting law. For the record, my name is Jan Sandberg. I am one of the co-chairs of the Charter Commission's Redistricting, Community Outreach, and Education Work Group. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Davis Carter. Commissioner Mechie.
Present.
Commissioner Clegg.
Here.
Co-chair Newborn. And co-chair Sandberg.
Here.
There are 3 members present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We'll now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Commissioner, the agendas for today's meeting is before us. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved, Mechie.
Second, Clegg.
Thank you. Is there any discussion before the clerk calls the roll? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Davis Carter. Commissioner Mechie.
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg.
Aye.
Co-chair Newborn. And co-chair Sandberg.
Aye.
There are 3 ayes.
That motion passes. The agenda is adopted. The next item on our agenda is the acceptance of the minutes from our meeting of August 11th, 2021. May I please have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved, Clegg.
Is there a second?
Second, Mechie.
Thank you. Is there any discussion before the clerk calls the roll? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on that motion.
Commissioner Davis Carter. Commissioner Mechie.
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg.
Aye.
Co-chair Newborn. And co-chair Sandberg.
Aye.
There are 3 ayes.
That motion passes. The agenda is adopted. And item 4 on the agenda is the chair's report. And I have nothing to report other than what is our only item, real action item that's on this agenda, not an action item, information item. Item 5 on the agenda is discussing the communication and outreach strategy for the redistricting process with Ray Dean from the city clerk's office. And as a bit of background, I believe the committee and in fact the entire redistricting group is very interested in Mr. Dean's thoughts about various issues about how to communicate with the public, best strategies, who to communicate with, and so forth. And I think we'll just open it up for any comments that he may have to begin with. And then if there's questions, we'll go to that. But all of his thoughts will be deeply appreciated.
Well, thank you, Chair Sandberg. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. The work that you're doing currently and the work that you'll be doing over the next few months is really going to be critical for the city and for the residents of Minneapolis. I think that I primarily want to start with the things that we all sort of know The city is very fortunate to have uh, an organization like NCR, which has a connection to all the neighborhoods. Clearly, a group that should be engaged and used. Uh, but as many of you know, that only hits a certain limited number of individuals within the city, those that are actually engaged in their neighborhood organizations. So, there are a lot of other organizations and a lot of other groups that I think need to be considered, and whether that's um, what I think of as typically like the Black churches. That's a way of connecting with a certain population within the community. There are many other sort of group-based folks, whether it's Copal, which is engaging with the Latino community in the city. There are several Somali groups and organizations that engage with their community, as well as groups that engage with the Lao and the Hmong populations as well. So I think there's a lot of groups that maybe folks aren't initially going to think about. I've had the opportunity to work with many of them over these past several years, and I think that it's the type of thing that making an early connection with them to sort of make sure that they know what's actually going through with this process of redistricting. I'm going to venture to guess that many of them just wake up one day and they hear that City of Minneapolis has new wards, or they have new park districts and school board districts. Not that we draw the school board districts, but the school board generally adopts what happens with the park board as well. They wake up one day and they hear about it, and that's sort of it. And I think that all of us know that engaging residents along in this process help to make it better. May not change a lot of what's being done, but ultimately their input and their understanding of what this process is can really be advantageous to what we do when those new lines, final drafts get issued, and then when the final lines are actually approved. So I'm excited to be working with all of you. Happy to dig in and help you identify what are those organizations and groups that probably should be connected with in the next few weeks as the process moves forward. And happy to answer any questions that you might have with your process of engaging community members as well.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
If you could, any thoughts you have, you mentioned all the Black churches, but I know there are quite a few of them. I assume there is some sort of a council or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it, but perhaps you would have thoughts about that. And any suggestions you have could certainly go to Mr. Munson, whom I'm sure will share it with the rest of the committee.
Yeah, there is somewhat of a council of pastors that are engaged, and there's a gentleman that does primary communication out to them.
Okay.
So I will get Mr. Munson's his name and contact information, and we can start making that connection through instead of trying to talk to 30 or 40 different pastors. It makes sense if it's coordinated from their end, and they do have a structure in place.
Okay. Do you have specific thoughts on?
Sandberg,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Sandberg, I want to be in queue, please.
Oh, yes. Commissioner Mecci, please, your question.
Yes, I have some input for both Radine and Greg with regards to your question. So Black ministers on both the north side and the south side have organized pretty substantially in an organization called 21 Days of Peace. 21 Days of Peace is run by Reverend McAvee and Lewis King from Summit Academy OIC. And then there's another group that's been working with DOJ called Community Unity Mediation Team. It's co-chaired by Mary Lagarde from Little Earth of United Tribes, or actually she's not at Little Earth anymore, she's at the American Indian Center, and Reverend Ian Bethel who is a minister on the South Side. So those are two groups that have very active participation from ministers, both South Side and North Side. And I also just want to speak on behalf of neighborhoods. I got a lot of feedback from folks. I think NCR is putting the information in their newsletter, but what people have asked for is that we are able, and I understand we have the mailing addresses, to post people on information for these public hearings directly to neighborhoods. Many neighborhoods, like on the north side, Harrison and Jordan, they have big connections with lots of cultural groups in their area. On the south side, Midtown Phillips and the other Phillips neighborhoods have what's called outreach partnerships with cultural organizations that we fund through a city grant. The 2022 funding is about outreach to underrepresented groups, and so we all are making engagement plans to reach out to other groups. And so I just want to continue to push getting timely information out to neighborhood groups directly, so that people have the information and then they can put it in their newsletters. Many people will post in the neighborhood newspapers. It can go on Facebook pages. There are a variety of ways. And I got a lot of emails from people that didn't know about Wednesday. So we need to do better getting information out to neighborhood groups. Thank you.
Commissioner Clegg.
Thank you. Thanks for your thoughts, Mr. Dean. I'm just wondering that this can't be an effort, a first-time effort for the city. I mean, other communications efforts must have reached out to these communities as well. And I'm also wondering, I know our communications go to close to 300 on NCR's list, and that's got to be more than just neighborhoods, unless there are multiple recipients in each neighborhood. So I'm wondering who's on their list.
That's a good question, because I'm not sure. Perhaps Mr. Dean knows?
You know, I don't know specifically who's on that list, but if I did quick math in my head with 87 neighborhoods in the city, if there's 3 people on each one, that gets us close to 300. But I would guess that it's probably going out to the executive directors and maybe the chairs of those particular neighborhood groups. That would be a good question to ask folks at NCR around community engagement.
I agree. It is called neighborhood and community relations, not just neighborhood relations. So if anybody has that information, it should be.
We may have it.
So Commissioner Clegg, there's also an and for Radine. They're part of the neighborhood community relations office. They have access and outreach specialists, and they reach out to all the different community groups throughout the city. And so they have a separate mailing list also of organizations.
Right. And I think we had some of that information a number of months ago, and Mr. Munson might want to chime in here. But we did get some information when we met with NCR staff. They did send us an email list, and it did include multiple names for each neighborhood. And Mr. Dean's absolutely right. I believe it was the executive director. Not all have one, but also at least the board chair, sometimes the vice chair. But they also, I don't think that list had the contacts for the other outreach groups, but perhaps Mr. Munson has more information.
Yeah, I will chime in here. Yes, so we got from the head of NCR, we got a list of, it was approximately 300, and that was multiple people associated with each of the neighborhood groups. And so that's the list of people that is getting the updates about every meeting. So yeah, I don't know what they would be doing with it beyond the emails that are coming their way. And then we are also working with a contact in NCR, Christina Kendricks, who is passing the information I sent her along to the rest of the NCR team that works with the various groups around the city. So
right.
There's multiple ways we're reaching out.
Right. I know they do have it. They do put it in their newsletter, but it's a long newsletter. So I think the individual emails are obviously much better. Anyway, Greg, do you know, I had a question about the media. We do have a number of radio stations and even newsprint. People still read newspapers, I guess, around the city. Does NCR deal with a lot of those, or is
I
that
think,
something we need to do separately?
I think that's primarily the Minneapolis Communications Group.
Communications.
And yeah, and I have been working with them. I will be honest that they have been swamped with issues this year, mainly in the election. And now that the election is over, we should see a little more activity coming on. So they have pushed out a number of newsletter items, both internal and external newsletter items recently, kind of associated with some of the work we've been doing on the website, the mapping tool, et cetera. And as we get into next year, you're going to see more frequent notices about the meetings and about anything else that's happening around the website. We have talked to the communications group around the radio stations. There hasn't actually been any particular activity around that. So I will bring that up with communications shortly.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. And Greg, you said you send out communications to this list and so forth. Is that just before the public hearings, or you're doing it before the map drawing meetings?
So we signed up everybody on that list to anything associated with redistricting. So they should be getting notices about any of the redistricting meetings. Okay. Just an automatic, we use this service called Gov Delivery. So anything will be delivered via Gov Delivery, any meeting related items.
And we would be telling them also about the YouTube after the fact recordings that are available to be seen.
I'm not 100% sure, and maybe Maddie knows about the Gov Delivery. I can check.
Yeah, Chair Sandberg, that would be in the link to the YouTube would be in those Gov Deliveries, but it doesn't necessarily send out another link after the meeting to the YouTube after that goes live.
Okay, and I think it was interesting. The city's YouTube channel, I'm fine with. I can find things on that. Park Board is an interesting challenge on YouTube sometimes. They list it differently, but that's the Park Board's problem, not mine. Oh, I think Commissioner Hawkins I think I saw something for her. Is Commissioner Hawkins here? I don't hear her. I see her, and now she's gone. Never mind. Okay. I was going to ask Mr. Dean his thoughts about strategy, and there she is.
I'm here.
There's Commissioner Hawkins. Okay, good. Very good. Thank you. I was going to ask Mr. Dean about strategy in terms of, we have messages coming out from the city, which I think people are fine with. Is there any value added by having us pushing more of our redistricting group members to send out more of their individual messages, A, to an individual person that they know, or B, to a lot of different organizations at once? I know some people, if they're part of a big email string, they kind of blow it off, if you don't do it individually. But do you have experience with that?
Yeah, I think the smaller groups of emails and coming from an individual may be something that would sort of increase the likelihood that people would actually open the emails and look at them. The critical piece of that, though, is you have to be sure that you're sending the exact same email to everybody. Oh, okay. Because if people are getting different information, that can be something that ultimately will cause confusion.
Sure.
Okay. So I think it's critical that it be a standard format, and I would go so far as to say, put it in a PDF type document. Oh, and Chair Clegg has his hand raised.
He has his hand up. Yeah. Chair Clegg.
Thank you. No, I was just going to say, a lot of times those are bubbles. I mean, like Minneapolis Twitter tends to cover redistricting a lot, but it's just to the people who use Minneapolis Twitter, right, which is sort of a confined group and an insular group. So yeah, I think it adds something. Everybody who gets it out adds something, but I think it should be the same email. And we should take this opportunity now that we have a draft map. I mean, that's what tends to draw people out. I've said before, Mr. Dean, many times, nobody shows up until there's a map. We go to listening sessions when there's no map and nobody shows up. 0 people. But once there's a map, then people see, oh, they're changing my ward, or they're doing this, or my neighborhood is affected some way. So then they start to show up. So this is an opportunity we have, if we can tie into networks of other community organizations other than neighborhoods. And maybe it's also an opportunity to redouble neighborhoods and reach out to people and say, look, we don't want you to just put this in your newsletter 4 weeks from now. You know, their board members and their members are on an email list. We want you to send it out to your community, not just put it in a newsletter that nobody reads.
And okay.
And then I was going to say to that point, you know, all neighborhoods have at least one meeting a month generally. There could, and it's not their whole neighborhood, it's generally the board. But I don't know if there's a strategy for redistricting charter commission members to actually go speak at these neighborhood meetings, board meetings, and engage people at a different level. Of course, you'd have to inquire to get on their agenda, find out where it is. It's going to be a lot of time and effort. But, you know, if out of the 87 neighborhoods, if you all over the next few months are able to get to even 20 or 30 neighborhoods to give a small presentation about the process, because I would bet that many people don't know what this process actually is and how it's constituted moving forward. I mean, the process at the state is clearly defined, and most people understand that. And usually the last thing in the process is ending up at the courts, and the courts deciding on the final lines. But the city has an opportunity to do things a little bit different.
I believe that Commissioner Clegg is about to say that we have a speakers bureau, and we do have a speakers bureau, but what I'm not sure about is, and this is a question for Greg, is in some of these communications with the neighborhoods, have we in fact asked them if they wish to have a presentation by a member of the speakers bureau? If we haven't done that, we should probably do that sooner rather than later, even though I'm not looking for a lot of extra speaking opportunities over the next few weeks, but we should at least know, and then we might be able, we have members of our redistricting group who are quite articulate and very good with working with groups of people. So we could even expand our list. There's Greg, he can answer the question.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, and I will check in with Christina tomorrow with that very notion that we have a number of very qualified speakers. We do have a PowerPoint presentation that we can use as well. And I think you've done a good job of putting together kind of a consistent way that we would deliver the message. And so I'm going to offer it up, and unless I hear any objections from anybody, because it does mean more work.
Yeah, well,
I
hopefully
was
more
going
work
to say that most neighborhoods have 4 membership meetings per year, which include all the members, not just those dozen or so that are on the board. So those tend to be bigger meetings. They have more newsworthy items on the agenda. They get the council member there to give a report, et cetera, talk about big projects in the neighborhood. Those would be the agendas we want to get on.
Well, I think that Greg could address that, although to be fair, the neighborhoods I've been most familiar with don't have that many membership meetings here, but whatever it is, I think we should shoot for the membership meeting, but even—
The city is making them do that now.
Is making you, okay. Making you, okay. But at least, I mean, even speaking to the board would be helpful. Sometimes they might be reluctant to send out information unless they've kind of scoped it out first. You know, there's a protective element there, I would suspect. But yes, we should pursue that. I think that would be terrific. And I think we should encourage, we're trying to encourage our redistricting group members to reach out to their constituencies. And I agree with Commissioner Clegg about the Twitter thing, although there has been some really interesting stuff out. People are really putting thought into this more than we ever saw 10 years ago, into but part of it's because we have a public mapping tool now for them. So maybe we need to be more prominent there. I don't know. That's kind of
Sure.
hard to do.
Chair Sandberg, and you may not
Yeah.
know this, it might be something that Greg might know. So is there a particular at Minneapolis redistricting or something like that as far as a Twitter handle that, you know, people can connect to, or is it generally, oh, it looks like Commissioner Hawkins might actually have a response to that. So I'll turn it over to you if you do.
Yes, Commissioner Hawkins.
I was just going to say, as a person that is one of the executive directors out here in the neighborhood, one of the ways to get this out would be not only at the annual meeting, but each neighborhood is connected to Nextdoor. And that goes to all of the neighborhoods. Each ED is connected to Nextdoor. So that's another way to get this out. In addition to their newsletter, each ED has some kind of communication list that they can put it out. So it can get out there, especially with the map. I think the map should be attached, especially with the map.
Commissioner Hawkins, I think I'm hearing you volunteer to perhaps work with Greg and make sure that we're doing what we can with Nextdoor. I am a member, but frankly, I am not proficient in that, how those things interact. But if you could speak to Greg after the meeting or something and make sure we get that done, because it's very important. And I see Chair Clegg once again.
Yeah, I was also going to suggest that we push on NCR to see exactly who these notices are going to. I have to believe they have at least lists of community organizations, the faith community, et cetera. And if we're not communicating with those lists, we should be. And perhaps we ought to devise some sort of master communication that has a picture of our draft map on it that goes to not only neighborhood organizations, but urging the executive directors and the board chairs to send it out to the whole neighborhood saying, this is happening to you now. And it's the same thing true with faith organizations and other community organizations. And I have to believe
does have that list of the faith organizations.
That NCR has that information.
Yes, they do.
Okay. And so this is information for Greg might find useful in his talks with Ms. Kendrick, because I'm sensing that, okay, we just had our meeting where we had a public hearing. We have another public hearing scheduled on the 15th, but we're likely to make I assume we're going to make modifications to that draft map before that meeting, or else why have another public hearing? So we're talking about getting something out to this community within the next 10 days. Chair Clegg, you know better than I do.
No, I was just going to say, we're going to have our second public hearing on the same map. But
we are.
What we are, okay. Then we have 2 more public hearings on our final draft map. That's what the charter says. But we are going to have a couple of meetings between now and the 15th. And they won't be mapping meetings. They'll be to see if we can reach consensus on what changes should be made based on input we've had from the community, such as, I'll pick an easy one. Move the line in Marcy Homes so it's not in the middle of the neighborhood and move it to be consistent with the freeway, or things like that we can all agree on, or most of us can agree on, and that'll give us some direction for when we do create the final maps.
So if we're sending a communication out to the neighborhoods and faith communities or anybody else with the map attached, same content, we're going to be consistent. We're going to say we've had a public hearing. We're going to have another public hearing. Pay attention, participate. Would you also advise them that they might want to listen to these extra mapping meetings to see the other factors that are being considered? Frankly, the last public hearing had a nice list that developed of what people were saying. Some of them you might not agree with, but at least most people were sort of specific.
I
don't
would
know.
try and encourage people to watch more than the public hearings
Okay,
or participate in more than the public hearings. The people who want to be more involved than that already know how to do it, and are already involved. If we're reaching out to people who are relatively uninvolved now and say, you got to go to these 4 meetings and watch these YouTube things, it's not going to
no,
work.
but should we be soliciting their comments in advance of the December 15th meeting?
We should make them aware of all of the opportunities to comment. They can send an email to us, they can comment on the website, they can draw their own map on the website, or they can come to the public hearing.
Okay.
And the public hearing is probably the least convenient way for people to offer input, because it's at a given time. They have to sit there waiting on hold.
Yeah.
It's just an anachronism from the charter. I think it's the reason we have public hearings. But the easiest way to contribute is either sending an email or doing a megaphone message on the website.
Okay, and was that Commissioner Metke I heard?
This is Commissioner Metke again.
Yes.
So just as a reminder again, the end of the month, so like next week is when we would need information to be able to get them in neighborhood newsletters or neighborhood newspapers. And with regard to testifying at the public hearing, you know, that's always an option, but I also push neighborhoods that I work with to listen to them, to keep informed, to know what's going on, to be able to look at the maps. And so I think another element of making sure that they have timely notification is that they can listen. And if they're not able to listen live, that they know that it's on YouTube and they can go to it and how to find it, and to keep pumping that information out. I know a lot of people in Loring Park and Midtown Phillips watch this when it's not live, but when it's taped, and they'll call or email with questions. And so I think that there's as Commissioner Hawkins said, there is a lot of connections that we can help with to get that information out there.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this master communication, we should be prepared to get it out within the next week or so, but being careful about Thanksgiving. So probably the few days after Thanksgiving. I know we're running into the end of the month, but holidays are tough to work around for people. Does that sound about right? Thanks. And Greg,
I don't think
we have
to worry about Thanksgiving, because this is going to be an email communication in all likelihood. So.
Okay, so if we can get something out next week, and I don't know if Greg, it's on your list.
Yeah, so I hate to tell everybody like this, but I'm going to be out for 2 weeks starting on Monday. So I will put together what I have tomorrow and circulate it around. Again, we have a PowerPoint that can be used, and you know, I have a number of things I've written up for our communications team, which I can also circulate, and then we can put together PDFs of the maps. Would that give everybody enough to communicate? And I'm going to talk to Christina Kendrick tomorrow as well, just to get that underway. What else can I do in the next day to?
Well, we'll make sure.
I think that sounds great.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Get it, and just get out whatever we can as quickly as we can to people, and with what Barry certainly has suggested, with here's multiple options for you to consider. Now the question that Mr. Dean asked, I don't have an answer to, which is, do we have a city redistricting Twitter account?
We don't. I was going to chime in there.
Let's do that.
We have a city Twitter. The clerk's office has a Twitter, which is probably the closest we would come to having a specific redistricting Twitter account. And if you've got something you want to go out on Twitter, I'm sure Casey, the city clerk, would be happy to put any information out on Twitter.
And we could also develop a hashtag too that would follow.
Sure. Okay. And now you're getting out beyond my skill level. So good. I think that would be useful. I certainly don't think it would hurt. And the people on Twitter do love to throw around hashtags and other things. So you know, I think it's a good idea.
I was going to suggest, in addition to that, you know, nobody's going to flip through the PowerPoint to read what redistricting is about or how it works. But if we could do a one-page explainer, which Jan, you or I could dictate in about 15 minutes, it would just say, here's the draft map. Here's why it's important to you. Here's the draft park board map. Here's why it's important to you. Here are your opportunities to comment in these different ways and on these dates. Act now. You know,
okay.
That's a half-page explainer is going to be a lot more effective than here's a 10-point PowerPoint for you to go through.
Okay. No, I think that's a good idea. And I think Commissioner Schwarzkopf, hi.
Hi there. And listening to this, when I work with the map, because it's so small, I do not know what the streets are many times. And I don't know how we can make it better so people know what the streets are. Maybe neighborhood people can just kind of guess what the streets might be. But that might be a problem we should be trying to figure out.
Oh, that's usually I tell people to go to District R and then zoom down, although you are correct. Sometimes even then, it's hard to see the street names, and the neighborhoods are sometimes iffy. There too, there's borders. You can get the borders, but they don't always give the neighborhood name. So I go to a cheat sheet I have for neighborhoods to figure out the names because I don't remember them all. But that's a good, Greg is listening, I know that. Okay, so Barry, what do you, I mean, I can throw together one pager and share it with you and Greg tomorrow. I should be able to have time tomorrow morning to do that. So,
That would be great.
And the rest of the committee also, just to see what, yeah, well, Greg is in charge of the rest of the committee. You don't want to get too many quorum people. Okay, I think that's, well, you know, so Greg's going to check on Twitter account issues and hashtag issues. We're going to put together a draft one pager to send to Greg tomorrow morning. We're going to, let's see, check with Christina Kendrick, NCR, about some of the whole faith community, other kinds of communities besides neighborhoods. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kim, I just saw your hand up. Yes, one of our redistricting group members, Mr. Dean, is Jonathan Kim.
Hi,
Yes,
yeah, I just wanted to mention, I know there was talk about a hashtag. I think I'm the only person who's been using it, but I have tried to get the hashtag redistrict MPLS off the ground.
Ooh, okay.
And so, yeah, so if you were to look that up right now, I think you'll only see tweets that I have sent, but that is an option, and it does have some maps and discussions that I've used in there, so that might be useful if you wanted to use that.
Okay, oh, that would be great. Yeah, I don't do tweets, but I do like tweets, so I seldom do tweets, but it's just, never mind. Okay, so we have a few things that are in process. It's a lot of it's on Greg's back to contact people about things. Mr. Dean has volunteered, I believe, other page of my notes, to continue discussions with Greg about his thoughts about different contacts within the faith community and beyond. What am I missing here, folks? Oh, I think, let's see, Commissioner Hawkins was going to speak with Greg about the whole next door thing, because I know a lot of people use it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, it's good to have.
Greg can contact me tomorrow.
Okay, I do like to have people who know what they're doing in charge of things.
Okay.
This is good. Okay. Oh, and wait, Jonathan had his hand up again. Yes.
Sorry, yeah, just for the record, if you wanted to, in case y'all were curious, I have already spoken to a couple of student groups, the Urban Studies Student Association and the Political Science Student Association at the University of Minnesota. And I am in talks. I've reached out to a few people over at Augsburg to try to make sure I'm including them as well. And a couple of other student groups, like some people from Humphreys that I've been trying to reach out to. So yeah, so only spoken to those two student groups so far, but I'm in the process of trying to include others as well. So. Oh,
that's terrific. Yeah, you had mentioned that before. I'm sorry I didn't bring that up. Because I think given the discussion at the public hearing the other night, the university community was mentioned by a number of people. So it's going to be a continuing issue going forward. I know that. So what else was there? I mean, I think unfortunately we've dumped a lot on Greg's plate for the next day or so, but I'm not quite sure what else we can do about that if we want to keep things moving forward. Were
Greg,
there other? Yes,
I mean,
Mr.
I'll
Dean.
just jump in. Greg, loop me in with Christina.
Yeah, I will do that.
And so when you leave, I can try to monitor that and, assist with, making sure that the connections and things we need to do get out. I mean, I'm assuming you're not going to work 24 hours a day tomorrow.
That's probably a good assumption, yes.
Yeah. So you can unload a couple of those things onto me, especially working with Christina. I worked with her
Good.
around some of the elections, engagement of communities in elections.
Good. Well, and Ray, Charlie and Grant in our office kind of control the Twitter account for the clerk's office. So we have a good in there to get something out on Twitter if we want to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Were there other questions for Mr. Dean? Or other comments about how we're going to move forward in the next few days? Anybody else? Because if there's not, we're going to release people to go to other exciting things here. Okay, I think with that, we've concluded the business to come before our, this name is way too long. The Charter Commission's Redistricting Community Outreach and Education Work Group. An acronym would really be nice. And therefore, without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Dean. It was very nice talking to you. Very helpful.
Thank all of you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Jonathan, for showing up, and Lyle for your comments.